Brian, get out. Now. What? You heard me. I want you gone. He barked a disbelieving laugh. You're kicking me out on your birthday? I am. And what's more, from today on, I won't ask for your help with anything. Not even a nail in the wall. If having a mother is such a burden, I'll lighten your load. I walked to the front door and opened it, my fingers trembling on the cold doorknob. 65 years of life and I'd never kicked anyone out of my house, much less my only son. But there I stood, spine straight and chin held high, as the orange cake I'd spent the morning baking cooled on the table behind us. Mom, you're being dramatic. No, I'm being realistic, for the first time in a long time. When the door slammed shut, the sound echoed through the empty house. Through the window, I watched Brian get into his car, gesticulating nervously as he talked to Melissa. My little grandson, Leo, peered from the back window, his confused face making me swallow hard. The car lurched away. I went back to the birthday table, now silent. Grandma Eleanor's antique china tea set still quivered slightly, a residual tremor from Brian slamming his hand down. I traced my fingers along the rim of a teacup, feeling the embossed flowers I'd known since childhood. How many stories had these cups witnessed? And now, this one. You're probably wondering how we got here. How a mother and son who love each other could shatter like this, especially on a day meant for celebration. Everything started to shift about 4 months ago, when I noticed the first signs. Brian, who had always been a good son, not perfect of course, but present in his own way, began to pull away. Our Sunday visits, which were almost sacred, became rarer. The calls during the week, shorter. We're busy, Mom. Work's really demanding, he'd always say. I understood, or tried to. Brian is a manager at a tech company. Melissa works at a law firm. And little Leo demands a lot of attention. Modern life is like that. Fast-paced, no room to breathe. So different from my time as an elementary school teacher, when things seemed simpler. But there was something else. I noticed it in the glances exchanged between my son and my daughter-in-law, whenever I talked about my plans or decisions. A flash of impatience, as if I were a child proposing something absurd. It was subtle at first. So subtle I even doubted what I was seeing. In March, when I mentioned I was thinking of taking a little trip to Caldas Springs with my sister Terry, Brian frowned. Just the two of you? I don't know, Mom. What if something happens? What could happen, son? We're two perfectly capable women, not two kids. Capable women, exactly, Mom. You're not exactly spry anymore. That stung, but I bit my tongue. After all, he was just worried, wasn't he? I ended up not taking the trip, more to avoid friction than out of agreement. Then came the cell phone incident. My old one finally died after years of use. I went to the store and chose a new model, simple, within my budget. When I told Brian, he seemed annoyed. Why didn't you consult me first, Mom? I could have gone with you. You probably paid more than you should have. Brian, I bought a phone, not a car. I researched the prices. I made my choice. You don't even really know how to use these things. You should have waited for me. Again, I let it go, but something inside me started to stir, a discomfort that festered. The last straw was 2 weeks ago when Melissa called to ask if I could watch Leo for a few hours. Of course I could. I adore my grandson, and afternoons with him are precious. I baked cookies, got out his games. I was excited. When they arrived, Melissa handed me a list. Linda, here's everything Leo can and can't eat, his schedule, and what to do in case of an emergency. I looked at the paper, confused. It was an extensive list, as if I were a hired babysitter, not the grandmother who had already cared for him dozens of times before. Melissa, dear, I know how to care for my own grandson. Of course you do, Linda, but it's just to be sure. You know how kids are these days. They have specific needs. When they left, I read the list more carefully. Among the instructions were, don't let Leo eat too many sweets. You always overdo it. And if he wants to watch TV, only the cartoons on the tablet. Open TV shows aren't suitable. That stung. I raised a healthy son. I was a teacher for 30 years. And now I was being treated as if I couldn't tell what was good or bad for a child. That day, I followed the list to the letter. More out of love for my grandson than out of agreement with those rules. When Brian came to pick Leo up, I commented, trying to sound casual. Brian, I thought that list Melissa sent was a bit excessive. You know you can trust me, right? He took the list, gave it a quick glance, and replied, Mom, those are just normal precautions. You sometimes forget things. It's normal at your age. Forget things? What things? Last week you didn't remember Aunt Carmen's birthday. And last month you mixed up your doctor's appointment. That happens to anyone, Brian. It has nothing to do with my age. He gave me that smile. The one he used when he was a teenager and thought he knew more about life than I did. If you say so. But it doesn't hurt to be careful, does it? That's when I realized what was happening. In Brian's eyes, I'd crossed an invisible line. I was no longer the capable mother, the respected teacher, the independent woman. I had become, in his eyes, an elderly woman who needed to be watched, monitored, corrected. And then came my birthday. 65 years. It's a milestone, I'll admit. But I feel strong, clear-headed, capable. I woke up excited that morning, determined to have a special day. I tidied the house, baked the orange cake, Brian's favorite since he was a kid, and set the table with the lace tablecloth I inherited from my mother. When the doorbell rang, I smoothed my hair and practiced my best smile. But Brian came in alone, with that look I knew so well. Melissa's in the car with Leo. She's got a headache. I nodded, trying to hide my disappointment. It wasn't the first time Melissa had found an excuse to cut visits short. We sat at the table, and I tried to keep the conversation light. I asked about work, about Leo, about their vacation plans. Brian answered in monosyllables, checking his phone every few minutes. That's when I mentioned, casually, my plans for a small bathroom renovation. Renovation? With what money, Mom? Do you think money grows on trees? The change in his tone was instantaneous, from disinterested to furious in seconds. I'll use some of my savings, son. It's just a small thing. Your savings? And when they run out? Who's going to have to help? Me, of course. I froze. When did my son assume he had a say in how I spend my own money? Brian, it's my money. My retirement. My savings. Which won't last forever. Melissa and I work ourselves to the bone while you sit here spending money on silly things. That's when he slammed his hand on the table, making Grandma Eleanor's antique china tea set rattle. That porcelain set had survived moves, emotional earthquakes, decades of family history. Seeing it tremble under my son's rage felt like watching our entire family history tremble. His words continued, growing harsher. He talked about everything he'd ever done for me, as if I were a heavy burden he carried out of obligation, as if I hadn't spent sleepless nights when he had a fever, as if I hadn't saved for years to put him through college, As if I hadn't cared for his father in his last months. Changing his diapers, administering his medication, being strong when all I wanted to do was break down. And then, something inside me snapped. Or perhaps, something finally clicked into place. A clarity I hadn't felt in a long time washed over me. I slowly stood up, my legs trembling, but my voice didn't. "Brian, get out. Now." The rest you already know. The door slamming, the car pulling away, the deafening silence that remained. That night, sitting alone in the living room with the untouched remains of my birthday cake, I cried. Not out of sadness, though there was plenty of that. I cried from relief, for finally saying no to disrespect, for defending my worth as a person, not just as a mother. I picked up the phone and called Terry. My older sister had always been my safe harbor, even living in another city. "Terry, it's Linda. Happy birthday, sis. How was the party?" I told her everything, omitting nothing. The tears returned, but my voice remained steady. "You did the right thing, Linda," Terry said after a beat of silence. "It was high time someone showed that boy you're not a doormat." "But what if he doesn't come back? What if I lose my son and my grandson?" "If you lose them for demanding respect, then you'd already lost them anyway." The next day, Terry showed up at my door with a suitcase. "Came to stay for a few days," she announced, walking in without waiting for an invitation. "And we're going to get that bathroom renovated." She helped me find a good contractor, choose the materials, reorganize my finances. I discovered I had more control over my life than I'd imagined. For 2 weeks, I heard nothing from Brian. No calls, no texts. The silence hurt more than the harsh words. Sometimes I'd wake in the middle of the night, convinced I'd heard Leo's voice, only to find the house empty and silent. But I didn't back down. I didn't call, begging forgiveness for a mistake I hadn't made. Instead, I pressed on with my plans. The new walk-in shower was installed. The bathroom walls got a fresh, bright coat of paint, and I even bought new towels to match. 3 weeks after our fight, when the renovation was finished, I got a message from Melissa. A photo of Leo holding a drawing, a stick figure with gray hair, a huge red heart, and the words Grandma Linda scrawled in a shaky hand. "He misses you," the message read. "We do too." I stared at that photo for a long time. My little grandson, so small and innocent, oblivious to the adult complications around him. My heart ached with longing. But then I remembered what Terry had said. If you bend now, nothing will ever change. I took a deep breath and replied with a picture of my new bathroom. "Whenever you want to visit, the door's open. But the rules have changed." I didn't explain what the new rules were. I let them wonder. Brian showed up the following Sunday alone. He looked smaller somehow, less imposing. He stood in the doorway, as if waiting for me to invite him in. "May I come in, Mom?" I stepped aside, and he walked past me, looking around like he was in unfamiliar territory. "Your bathroom looks nice," he commented after an awkward silence. "It does. Exactly how I wanted it." We sat in the living room, the same room where we'd argued weeks before. But something had changed. It wasn't just the renovated bathroom or the fresh flowers Terry insisted I buy to brighten up the place. It was something in the air, in the way we looked at each other. "Mom, I came to apologize," he started, the words coming out with difficulty. I was unfair to you." I just nodded, waiting. I wasn't going to make it easy for him this time. I think I've been treating you like you're incapable, as if your age has taken away your right to make decisions. That's exactly what you've been doing, Brian. He lowered his eyes, embarrassed. I just wanted to protect you. After Dad died, I was scared of losing you too. And your way of protecting me was to diminish me, to make me feel useless and incapable? It wasn't intentional, Mom. I swear it wasn't. We talked for hours. I cried, he cried. It wasn't easy, but I set clear boundaries. I told him I loved him, but I wouldn't accept being treated like a burden or an incompetent child anymore. I'm 65, Brian, not 95. And even at 95, I'd still deserve respect. He agreed, ashamed. Before he left, he hugged me tight. Tighter than he had in a long time. Are you going to let Leo visit? He really misses you. Of course I will. He's my grandson and I love him more than anything. But Melissa needs to understand that I'm perfectly capable of looking after him without a list of instructions. Brian smiled, a genuine smile this time. She understands now. We both do. When he left, I stood at the door, watching his car drive away. I didn't know if things would truly change, if our relationship could be rebuilt on new foundations. But for the first time in a very long time, I felt hope. That night of my birthday, when I opened the door for my son to leave, wasn't just a moment of rupture. It was a moment of rebirth. At 65, I discovered I could still stand up for myself, set limits, demand respect. And as I closed my front door that night, something told me the next chapters of my life would be written with a firmer pen by a hand that had finally remembered its own strength. But what I didn't know yet was that the door I closed that night would open many others in my life. Doors I never imagined existed, that would lead me to places I never thought I'd visit at 65. The week after Brian's visit, Terry insisted I accompany her to the neighborhood community center. There's a group of mature women who meet on Wednesdays. You'd really like them, she said as she packed her bag to go home. A group of mature women? Sounds like a euphemism for little old ladies' club, I replied, laughing. Well, let me tell you, those little old ladies have more energy than most young girls out there. They do everything from painting to dance classes. One of them, Betty, started college at 70. Reluctantly, I ended up agreeing, more to please my sister than out of real interest. Terry had been my rock these past few weeks. She deserved this small gesture. When I arrived at the community center that Wednesday, I expected to find a quiet group of ladies knitting or crocheting. Instead, I was greeted by loud laughter and an animated discussion about a book they were all reading. You must be Linda, Terry's sister. A woman with completely white hair and vibrant red lipstick approached me. I'm Betty. Welcome to our group. I looked around, surprised by the energy of the place. There were about 15 women, all over 60, some probably in their 80s, but none seemed to behave like the little old lady society expects. We're discussing our next project, Betty explained. Half of us want to organize an art exhibit, the other half prefer a literary poetry reading. And what do you think? I asked, curious. Me? She smiled, mischievous. I suggested we do both and include a dance night. Why choose when we can have it all? That afternoon, I met extraordinary women. Irene, who at 78 ran a cooking blog. Diane, who after being widowed at 67 started traveling alone across the country. Joyce, who taught painting classes to underprivileged children. And so many others, each with her own story of reinvention. How do you do it? I asked during coffee. Don't you feel like it's too late to start new things? Betty laughed as if I'd told a hilarious joke. Honey, it's too late when you're in the coffin. And even then, I have my doubts. She laid her hand over mine. You know when I really started living? At 68, when I told my arrogant son-in-law where he could stick it, after he suggested I sell my house and move to a more suitable place for my age. That hit me like a lightning bolt. It was exactly what I had done with Brian. And what happened next? I asked, eager. Oh, he was furious. My daughter cried. It was a whole drama. Betty shrugged. But you know what else. After a while, they realized I wasn't going to change my mind. And little by little, they learned to respect me as an adult, not as a senile child. I returned home that day with my head buzzing. There was something about those women that fascinated me. It wasn't just the energy or the activities they did. It was their attitude, their refusal to accept the diminished role society tries to impose on older people. The following week, I went back to the group. And the week after that, too. Soon, I was actively participating in discussions, offering ideas, making true friendships. It was Diane who invited me on my first adventure. I'm going to Calder Springs next week, she commented casually. Want to come with me? Calder Springs, the trip Brian had discouraged me from taking. I don't know. I hesitated. I need to see if... See if what? Diane raised an eyebrow. If your son will let you? I blushed, embarrassed. It's not that. It's just... Look, Linda. She leaned in, serious. I have 3 kids and 7 grandkids. I love them all. But if I waited for their approval for every decision I make, I'd still be sitting in my living room waiting for death to arrive. That phrase echoed in my head for days. When Brian came to visit me that weekend with Leo and Melissa, I mustered up my courage. I'm going to Calder Springs next week, I announced as I served the coffee, with a friend from the community center. The silence that followed was heavy. I saw Brian and Melissa exchange that look, the same one from before. But this time, I didn't avert my eyes. Mom, are you sure? It's a long trip and... I'm sure, Brian. I've already bought the tickets. He opened his mouth to argue, but then he seemed to remember our recent conversation. He swallowed what he was going to say and nodded. All right, just call when you get there, okay? Of course I'll call. I'm your mother, not a rebellious teenager. Melissa, surprisingly, was the first to smile. I think that's great, Linda. You deserve to have some fun. I looked at her, surprised by the unexpected support. Maybe Melissa wasn't the villain I'd imagined. Maybe she was just a young woman trying to do her best, the same way I tried when I was her age. The trip to Calder Springs was revelatory. Diane was an experienced and laid-back travel companion. We stayed at a simple but comfortable inn, spent days in the thermal waters, took strolls through the town, tried different foods. One night, sitting on a balcony watching the sunset, Diane asked me about my marriage. Was it happy? The question caught me by surprise. No one had asked me about Richard in years, as if my married life had been erased when he died. It was complicated, I answered honestly. Richard was a good man, a good father. But we were from different generations, you know. He thought a woman's place was at home, raising the kids. And you accepted that? At the time, it seemed like the right thing to do. I had my teaching job, which he tolerated because the salary helped. But at home, everything was always exactly how he wanted it. Diane nodded, understanding. My first husband was like that, and my second. It wasn't until the third one that I finally got it right. 3rd? My eyes widened. You've been married 3 times? And I'm dating again now at 72. She winked, amused. Life's just too short to be alone if you don't want to be. That conversation opened a door inside me I didn't even know was locked. I started thinking about Richard, about our marriage, about how I'd molded myself to fit his expectations, and how, after he passed, I unconsciously started molding myself to fit Brian's expectations. When I got back from that trip, something in me had fundamentally shifted. It wasn't just my tanned skin or the lighter smile. It was an inner certainty, a deep understanding that my life was still in my hands. Brian noticed the difference immediately. "You look different," he commented when he came to visit after I got back. "Different how?" "I can't quite explain it. More alive?" I smiled, appreciating the observation. "That's because I am more alive, son." In the following weeks, I kept going to the group at the community center. I even helped organize the art exhibition. Betty managed to pull off both the exhibition and the poetry slam, just like she'd planned. To my surprise, I found I still loved to paint, something I'd given up when Brian was born. "You've got talent," Joyce observed, looking at my sunset painting. "You really should develop that." And so I started taking painting classes. Twice a week, I'd sit in front of a blank canvas and just let the colors speak. It was liberating, almost therapeutic. At home, I made changes too. I rearranged the living room furniture, donated clothes I hadn't worn in years, bought new plants. Small transformations that mirrored the inner shift I was experiencing. 3 months after our confrontation on my birthday, Brian showed up one Saturday afternoon with a serious expression. "Mom, we need to talk." My heart sped up. Despite all the positive changes, there were still moments when that old fear crept back in. Fear of losing my son. Fear of being alone. "Is something wrong, Brian?" He sat down, restless. "Yes and no. It's about the company I work for. They're offering me a promotion." "But that's wonderful, son." "The problem is I'd have to relocate to Denver." The world seemed to stop for a moment. Denver. Over 1,000 miles away. Too far for weekend visits. "For how long?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "It'd be permanent, Mom. At least for a few years." A knot formed in my throat. Just when we were finally rebuilding our relationship, when Leo was growing up, when I was learning how to be a grandma without being overbearing. "And what have you decided?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "I'm still thinking about it. It's a huge opportunity, but..." He hesitated. "I'm worried about you, Mom. All alone here." Oh, how differently those words would have hit me just a few months ago. I would have begged him not to go, made him feel guilty, positioned myself as an obstacle to his happiness. But the Linda of today was different. "Brian, you have to take this job." He looked at me, surprised. "You think so?" "I'm sure of it. It's a vital opportunity for your career, for Leo's future." "But what about you? Are you going to be okay here by yourself?" I smiled, thinking of Betty, Diane, Joyce, and all the other women I'd met. Thinking of the painting classes, the plans for a trip to Sedona with the group, the life I was building. "Son, I'm not alone. I have friends, I have activities, I have a life of my own. And I can always visit you in Denver, or you can come see me." He looked at me as if he were seeing me for the very first time. "You really have changed, haven't you?" "I have. Or maybe I've just rediscovered myself." That night, after Brian left, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea. I thought about how life comes full circle, how a moment of pain can pave the way for transformation. If Brian hadn't exploded on my birthday, if I hadn't found the courage to open that door and ask him to leave, maybe I'd still be living in the shadow of other people's expectations. Maybe I'd never have met Betty and the other women at the community center. Maybe I'd never have rediscovered my love for painting or my courage to travel. 2 weeks later, I helped Brian, Melissa, and Leo pack up their things for the move. It was a bittersweet day, full of memories and anticipation. Grandma's gonna visit real soon, I promised Leo as I hugged him tight goodbye. And can I stay at your house for summer break? He asked, his little eyes sparkling. Of course you can, my love. We'll have so much fun. When their car finally pulled away, I stood on the sidewalk waving until they were out of sight. There were tears in my eyes, but they weren't just tears of sadness. They were the tears of a woman who finally understood that true love, whether from a mother to a son or a grandmother to a grandson, doesn't trap, doesn't limit, doesn't diminish. True love sets you free. I went inside and headed straight for the room I'd transformed into a makeshift studio. I picked up a brush and started working on a new canvas, a family portrait I'd promised Leo. As the colors took shape under my hands, I smiled, thinking about how life can truly blossom at any age, as long as we have the courage to open new doors. 6 months passed since Brian's move. I visited them twice in Denver, and they came to see me for the Easter holiday. Our relationship had changed. It wasn't perfect. We still had our moments of tension, but there was a mutual respect that hadn't existed before. Melissa surprised me by becoming an unexpected ally. During my last visit, while Brian and Leo went to get ice cream, she confessed, "Linda, I wanted to apologize for how I treated you before." "You don't need to, honey. It's in the past." "No, I do. First period." I was scared. Scared? Of me? I asked, confused. Scared of getting old, of losing control. When I saw you, it was like looking at a future that terrified me. She hesitated. But now, seeing how you're living, I realized I was foolish. You taught me that life doesn't end at 60, or even at 70. That conversation moved me deeply. I'd never imagined my personal journey could inspire others, especially someone as young as Melissa. At home, my life took on new contours. My paintings were selected for a local exhibition. Nothing grand, but a recognition that filled me with pride. I started teaching art classes to kids at the community center once a week, rekindling my calling as a teacher. And to my surprise, I met George. George is a widower, 68, with a passion for literature that rivals my own. We met at one of the poetry slams Betty organized. We started as friends, sharing books and conversations. Slowly, something more began to grow. Our first unofficial official date happened one Sunday afternoon. We went to the movies and then walked through the park, talking about the film. When he took my hand, I felt like a teenager again, my heart racing, my cheeks flushed. "This is crazy, isn't it?" I commented, laughing nervously. "Dating at our age." George stopped, looking into my eyes. "Linda, the only crazy thing would be to waste the time we have. Life is now, no matter how old we are." When I told Brian about George during one of our video calls, he was silent for a moment. "Mom, are you sure?" "You barely know this man." I took a deep breath, remembering our past conversations. "Brian, I'm not asking for your permission. I'm sharing news about my life." He seemed to process my words, then nodded slowly. "Sorry. Old habits. When can I meet him?" I smiled, grateful for the evolution. The next time you all come to visit, I think you'll like him. He has a collection of antique toy cars that would totally amaze Leo. Wow. Today, looking back at that night of my 65th birthday, I see how one moment can change everything. When I opened the door for my son to leave, I wasn't just setting a boundary. I was making space for a new version of myself to walk in. At 65 and a half, I have a richer, fuller life than I did at 45. I have friends who inspire me, a hobby I'm passionate about, a relationship that makes me smile, and a healthier connection with my son and his family. It's not perfect. There are days my joints ache, days I worry about the future, days I miss having my grandson nearby. But those are just parts of life, not its entirety. What I've learned, and continue to learn, is that respect isn't something that comes automatically with age. It's something we sometimes have to demand, even painfully. And that it's never too late to open new doors, to rediscover parts of ourselves that were forgotten, to create a life that makes us wake up excited every morning. He didn't know what I'd do that day. Didn't know that at 65 I could still reinvent myself, find new strength. He didn't know his cruel words would be the very push I needed to reclaim my voice. And I didn't either. I didn't know there was so much life still waiting to be lived inside me. I didn't know that by closing one door, so many others would open. I didn't know my story was far, far from over. But now I do. And every morning when I open my eyes, I think, what door am I going to open today?